I'm Scott Allen Miller. It's the 27th of September, 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in Nicaragua, and today we talk about this a bit. That was unnecessarily loud. We're going to be talking about the biggest challenge, in my opinion, of moving to Nicaragua. What is it that you're going to face? What is the thing you have to be concerned about the most in a practical sense? Why is it so hard to move here or anywhere? Like, we're going to get to that right after the bump. Welcome to the show. And consistently, when I'm talking to people about moving to Nicaragua, one thing seems to be the biggest stumbling block of all the different things that we discussed. We talk about visas and residency, getting lawyers, having to do investment. There's all these things, flights, how you're going to get here, how do you deal with not being able to purchase a car in your own name. Like, we go through all that stuff, and those things are, they're challenges, but they're all pretty easy for the most part. But one thing really stands out that makes Nicaragua not completely just let me throw everything in the car, or throw all my stuff in a suitcase, not in the car. That'd be weird. You just drive to the border and you're like, oh, my clothes are in the trunk. Everything in a suitcase and coming down. And that is consistently that short-term housing that is necessary for relocation just is so hard to find. Now, it depends where you're going, it depends who you are, it depends who you know. Of course, there's exceptions and all kinds of things, and some areas are gonna be way better. I guarantee if you're moving into Managua or San Juan del Sur, you're gonna have enough options, right? Few, but some, because there's so many people and businesses and just things to accommodate that. For Managua, it's just sheer size. San Juan del Sur is such a big expat market and has so much temporary housing in so many different ways that, okay, they tend to work out, I think. Although I'd love to hear from people who've tried those locations specifically as to how that went. What was the availability of short-term rentals? Because we need two things for good short-term rentals, right? Two key things. Obviously, we need some form of apartment. It could be a house, it could be a room, it could be a traditional apartment, but we need something that allows us to move in and have a space to go, but that's large enough, right? Otherwise, we would just use hotel rooms. I mean, they would get expensive, but you would just use hotel rooms if you were looking for nothing else, right? So we're looking for more space, because when we move places, we need enough space to bring our things. We need space to kind of just move into, right? You need to be able to sit up in the living room and watch TV sometimes. You need to be able to leave your things and feel comfortable that it's your space. You know what I mean. So assuming those things, the two main things that really get us, one is that there is very little available for short term. Nearly all leases in Nicaragua are an absolute minimum of 6 months, with 12 months being what they are going to try to get. And this is reasonable, but it means we have problems, because when you're moving in for the first time, 6 months is a lot to do. And when you're doing that, of course, you need a deposit, and it's a big commitment. And of course, you have no infrastructure here. You just got off the plane. I know you're going to go to a hotel room for a day or two, but you want to get into an apartment pretty quickly in most cases. We're assuming you've come down and looked around a little bit and have some idea of where you're going, right? You've been to Nicaragua, you've done your due diligence, you've done your homework, and you're ready to start the process of moving down. And so there's a pretty general process that works really well here, which is you come down once or more times, you spend a few weeks, you get to know the country, you do your research ahead of time. This show, right? You're doing your research right now, I know you are, and then you're going to make that next step. All right, Scott, I know that you and Jack and Elton and other people here living in the GoPro box world. I love that some of you are like GoPro box denizens coming down to visit. So you're in there and you're doing this research and you're saying, okay, Scott, I know that this is definitely on my radar. This is interesting. I love the cost. I love the sound of activities. I love the price. Like, there's all these things that really sound great. I hope I'm allowed to be on this road because it's so beautiful. Like, I love walking spots like this. And then you come down and you spend some time and you go to Managua. You go, whoa, big city, not for me. You come to Leon. Oh, Scott, it's too hot. You go to Granada. Oh, too many tourists. And you end up in the Goldilocks zone of wherever, Esteli is the place for you. Oh man, the weather's beautiful. I like this restaurant that I discovered. I can order the things I need, and when I need to get to Managua, there's this easy bus and just whatever, right? So Esteli is your choice. Great. So now you know Esteli is probably the place you want to live. You need to spend some time there. Don't buy. We talked about this the other day. You don't just run out and buy. Right now, you need to figure out Esteli. That's going to take time. It's going to take a long time. You need a short-term rental. That's the thing you do next. So you come down. You come down with a plan to stay in Esteli. You know where you're going to be. You're not bouncing around. And for some of you, for me, love to come down and bounce around a lot. 6 months here, 6 months there, even 3 months here, 3 months there. Put in lots of time in different cities. Get to know those cities. Get to know the barrios. Get to know the restaurants you like. Get to know what the nightlife sounds like, what it looks like, how often fireworks go off, what the rainy season looks like, what the dry season looks like. There's all these things, right? And you only get that by staying in lots of different places, and you learn to compare them, not just, you know, we stayed in Granada. Had I never been anywhere else, I'd have been like, well, this is what Nicaragua's like, and it's pretty nice, but, you know, it's got these downsides. But then I came back and I spent more time and went to other places and went, oh, Nicaragua's way better than I imagined. And a lot of those downsides I could get rid of by going to other places. Downsides for me, maybe Granada's the right place for you. And so we ended up, you know, everyone really needs to end up putting in this time with a short-term rental. And we got pretty lucky that we found a short-term rental when we went to Granada. It was relatively easy for us. Of course, this was back when all that was easier in the past. It has not gotten easier for a long time. So unfortunately, this is a spot where things have gotten much worse in Nicaragua, just the availability of short-term rentals. So first of all, you need these rentals that are more flexible. Well, I want to be there, but only as long as it takes me to make some decisions. That decision is either that I'm going to leave, right? Okay, we rented in Granada for a while, and then we made the decision that we wanted to try somewhere else. Great, we needed to be able to move on, and we did. You may make the decision that you want to do that and then get a short-term rental in another city or countryside or whatever, and then you go do that and you explore that place. And at some point in doing that, maybe the first place, maybe the 10th place, you say, well, we found the spot. Now we want this short-term rental to continue until we buy or until we decide to get a long-term rental. That's fine too. Then you make the transition, but you start the process from the short-term rental of either looking for a long-term rental or looking for a place to buy. Either one, fine. At that point, as long as you're making an educated decision and you've done all your homework. So these short-term rentals are really, really important. Once you're going to be going, once you're like, I know where it, okay, so Esteli's good enough. We know we want this barrio for a minimum of 6 months. Then you're in great shape, right? Now you can get long-term rentals and you know you want to stay in the country and there's no more of those like big questions to ask, like, do I want to be in Nicaragua or do I want to be in the north, the south, or whatever. Now you can make the leap to buying all your own furniture and your own appliances and dishes and all those kinds of things because you're really confident that this is what you're going to do long term. And little things like, well, I need to move to a different barrio, you can do with a moving company, not with a huge amount of effort. Buenas tardes. So that's the first piece. And the second piece, anytime you're doing these short-term rentals, like I just said, you would then, when you get a long-term rental, look at doing appliances and furniture and that stuff. That means that in those short-term rentals, you need them to be furnished, which normally they go hand in hand, but be aware they might not. But that's really important. So those things, that short-term rental in logical places that is furnished is extremely hard to find. Now, if you're looking for, like I said, San Juan del Sur and Managua, you have much better chances of being able to do that. You'll be able to pull it off. Maybe you'll take some homework, but you'll be able to do it. If you're looking in Leon, it's going to get pretty hard, like really hard. Every person I know who comes here is like, oh, Scott, how do I find this? And we're like, we don't know. We don't find it either. When we do find it, which has happened, but it's the exception, right? And it's always a one-off. It's not like here's a company that's doing it and there's a range of things. It's, I know one person who does it as a luxury thing, as an Airbnb. I know one person who did it because it was their house and it was already furnished and they're willing to leave the stuff there because they don't know what else to do with it. So there's special cases, but once that place is rented, that's it. There's not a list of them, there's one, right? So it's like here, we work with Casamango, right? They have 3 short-term rental facilities there, but they're luxury. right? So it's not for our general audience. Obviously, you're all invited to use it, and some of the audience has it booked for this year, right? For a lot of this year has already gone to my audience, but they're not for the bulk of you. The bulk of you are like me. Like, you want to come down and you want to live, and I'm kind of hypothesizing, but of the people I've spoken to, right? And my understanding of the bulk of people who are watching from inside my little GoPro box is that you're mostly more likely to be looking for a more authentic Nicaraguan experience. Certainly not all of you. Some of you are looking for baller Nicaragua, or Managua Premium, as we call them here. And some of you are looking for enclave. Those are both things that are not my personal vibe so much. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like being baller Nicaragua from now and again, but I don't want it to be my everyday life. I love barrio living. I love being with workers and the real people and street food. And, I actually enjoy the loud music and all that, just not the fireworks. So there's a balance. But I only don't like the fireworks because I have dogs. And like, I don't want to live in the city center. I want to live in the barrio. Like that's all. That's who I am. And I think a lot of you are like that. So places like Casamango, which is fantastic, but city center, very baller, high price tag. You want an amazing place to spend 1 month, 2 months, as long as you have the budget for it, you're not going to beat it, right? It's the best in the city. So fantastic. Go there for, I think they have a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom, right? Woot, you're in great shape, but pricey. If you, like me, I want as close to what I can get as authentic, but I want it all furnished and dealt with. I want to be able to move into a place and live like a Nicaraguan who has good internet. And that's kind of it. I want a comfy couch. I want a TV. I want good internet. I don't want to deal with a bunch of extra stuff. I want things kind of handled for me, so a little bit like a hotel. But I want enough comfort that I can work, but I want to be very authentic, right? This is lower middle class Nicaraguan who's able to afford furniture, able to afford TV, able to pay for a little bit extra, but only a little bit. And I want to live very authentically and very frugally. I find that not just rewarding financially, that I'm not wasting money. I also find it very interesting, like actually taking part of living like people who live here and having that experience, and it gives you a much better ability to connect with people and to understand the world around you. Okay, so this is how real people live. I'm experiencing that, so when I interact with people, I have a much better connection, I think, with people. It's like, oh yes, I watch the same TV as you. Oh, I have the same set of experiences as you, at least in a very limited way. I find that really a big draw into where I want to live. So having apartments like that, extremely hard. They're very hard to find. They're very hard to market. And there's very little interest in it. I know that you guys are constantly asking me where you can find this, but you're the exception, right? This channel really lends itself to a very different lifestyle. And I think it's a great one. I think we have a great opportunity. I think we're doing amazing things as a little community here living inside my GoPro, but also, buenas tardes, but also as a benefit to the country of Nicaragua. Like, we're bringing a different group of people into the country. We're exposing it to a new group of people, you guys. And I think that's really valuable. We're doing some great work, so that's fantastic. But there's an infrastructure missing to make us able to make this leap from where we're interested and we want to learn more to actually knowing enough to safely make the final leap to long-term rental or buying, making the big investment in our appliances and stuff. That's really hard. That is a huge challenge that we have to overcome. This is really kind of a neat filming location, and I was just kind of like, where should I film today? Because I'm always looking for something different, and I only have limited time, right? I'm still working and everything. So hopefully you guys like this. As always, get down in those comments. Let me know what you think about how the camera looks, how the sound is, how do you like this filming location? I try to shake things up. I want you guys to see different bits of Nicaragua all the time. And this is a great example of, you could end up with a house if you wanted something secluded on a little country lane like this. How beautiful is this? And how little do you think of this as Nicaragua, right? Imagine this, if you had the right sound effects, you had the right feel of, 60 degrees, you could be in rural England here, right? Like, it's got a very different vibe. And yet it's pretty warm, although we have a decently cool breeze. It's not a hot day here, but it is warmer than England, trust me. Especially as I know some of my audience is in like Utah and a whole bunch. I got to do a shout out. I found out there are so many of you watching from Calgary. So hey to everyone from Calgary. That's crazy that's like a hot spot of people watching the show, but for some reason it is. So cool. Shout out to all of you. Welcome to the show. It's neat that you're here. And but yeah, get down those comments and of course ask more questions, because that's how we make so much of the show. And I do have a number. I've been working on putting them out. I've got like an organization system now to start doing it, and because they really seem to be popular. And as I mentioned it, you guys are really making it happen. So thank you. Awesome. So I think that this is where the biggest challenge is, and I don't have a good answer to this. Of course, you're going to be like, well, there's a huge opportunity in this. I don't know that that's true. There's an opportunity in this. Is it a good one? I don't know. Is it a big one? Definitely not. This is, we're, again, the exception, not the norm. So we're fighting an uphill battle against a market that this is just not what most people are looking for, whether it's the short-term rentals in the out-of-the-way locations, in the barrios, or in more authentic locations. Like it's tough, just fundamentally hard. So it's something that you need to be very cognizant of, that you're going to come down and this is going to be your really big challenge. How long are you going to stay in a hotel? How much is that going to cost? And hotels are not unreasonable. Could you stay in a hostel or a very basic hotel for between $20 and $35 per night in most markets and just stay that way? That basically puts you at under $1,000 of rent indefinitely in a hotel. Yeah, you probably can. And in many cases that might come with breakfast. So you may end up with a price that is not untenable. But if you're living on, say, $1,000 budget, that could be crippling, that the entire thing's going into a hotel. You can't do anything else. Maybe you could do it for 1 month, but you got to be prepared. You're going to eat through resources pretty quickly in a hotel. Now, of course, most hotels, if you're going to be living there for a month, they'll work something out and give you some amount of discount. But you know what I mean? Like, that's a high cost. You want to get to an apartment. Finding an apartment is going to be really, really hard because there's very few resources for finding them. There's no resources for listing them. There's so many barriers there. And I wish I had easy answers. I wish I could tell you, well, I've been down here, I've worked this out, I've got this secret answer. I don't. There is no easy answer to this. Marcella and I do constant home tours, always asking around, always keeping our eyes out for what's available on the market, which houses are for rent, which houses are for sale, which places are apartments, which places are not, like just regular houses. We have a decent idea of what there is in the market, and it is a real struggle to find places that are of a reasonable size, a reasonable price for rent, and those that are almost always are not furnished and are almost always at least 6 months. So there's this problem that even finding appropriate spaces is a challenge, and then finding them provided in an appropriate way is all but impossible. And you can think of it from the perspective of the Nicaraguans who own the places and are renting them. Why would they do that? They're never going to connect with you guys as potential audience for that. Sorry, I have an itch on my foot. So it's not a market they can go after. They don't have access to that. They would have to contact the show here and be like, oh, I heard the Scott guy talks about this. Can we show an apartment on there? I suppose we could. It would be very onesie-twosie, right? Here's one we found, right? Like, we'd love to show that and get the word out. And if someone out there is, for example, in Esteli, and you have a short-term rental that would work in that way, absolutely, I'd love to come to Esteli and show it off. That does require an entire day of my time. I've got to spend the night. Like, it's a big thing to be able to do that because it's hours away, but it is something we'd be interested in doing. So if anyone does know of a place, if it's San Juan del Sur, it's a little bit like, people can find those, right? There's resources for finding that stuff for the most part, not a big deal. But outside of that, most of the country, and if I'm in San Juan del Sur, of course I'd love to show it. It's just I'm not gonna make a trip for something that people probably can find. But if anywhere, if I'm gonna be in the area, I'm always happy to stop by and film whatever. I just want to show the country, right? It's fun to see, and because every time you guys get to see it, I get to see it in person, right? So I get to go everywhere and do everything, which is really cool. But like, I'd be more than happy to go to a lot of outlying areas, cities, towns, whatever, and see what there is. But I doubt more than one person is ever going to pop up on the show and be like, hey, we got this thing for you to see. There's actually a truck coming down this road. I gotta go. That was a little bit unexpected. So it's really important when you're coming down, you're looking at making this move, and you're looking to do all these things, that you take some time to really consider how this could impact your decision making and your ability to move down. Of course, I'm encouraging you to come down if this is something that you're looking to consider. Nicaragua is fantastic. I love it. But this is the big challenge. The big challenge is not getting your visa, your residency, not being able to invest or not being able to find work, not being able to be allowed to stay. For depending on who you are, maybe those things will come up as a challenge, but probably not. What is going to come up as a challenge almost certainly is this inability to find this interim housing. And this is one of the factors that drives people to try to get longer term housing really quickly. And of course, if you can make the decision, stay in hotels, move around, come down and visit a few times, whatever it takes, and get to the point where you're sure you could handle a 6-month lease and you're able to move your stuff around, you know, using a moving company, a truck, whatever, and the amount of things you have could be, maybe you end up with a truck and you can fit everything into it, right? Be creative, come up with whatever makes sense for you. But whatever you're going to do, once you can get to that 6-month or 12-month lease and you're able to, you know, try out Esteli for a year, make your decision, and then be like, you know what, maybe it's Jinotega that we want. Maybe it's farther up the mountain. Maybe it's not this big city. It's a little town that I want. Head up there, do a year lease, bring all of your appliances with you, and then it starts to be possible to do some things you can't do otherwise. But if you're stuck needing the short-term rental, which the majority of people are, it gets really hard really fast. And I know right now, as I'm doing this video, there is someone from the channel, one of you guys is here in the city walking around looking for a rental that I don't know exists, right? He's looking for a size and a time period that are generally not available. That doesn't mean he won't find one, and he's willing to look in the barrios and he's looking in some interesting places. But I walk around all the time and I literally never find anything like this. So I don't know how in a few days or even a few weeks someone's going to be able to do these things. That is an immense challenge. And so what people end up doing quite often is coming down and staying in a hotel as long as they can muster, and then spending some time looking for a longer term rental. And of course, long-term rentals are pretty plentiful. That should not be hard. You may not find it in one day, but you're gonna find it in just 2 or 3 days if you're not being super picky. And if you're being pretty picky, you may be looking at 2 or 3 weeks, but you're not looking at outrageous amounts of time. You're looking at reasonable amounts of time, an amount of time that a normal person could stay in a hotel, not a problem. And of course, you've got to get the house and then you've got to get it ready to move in. So some things. We're going to do a future episode where we do a breakdown of some real world cost of, I really hope, at least 2 places, and show you the full cost of going from this as a rental to moving in with nothing having been purchased ahead of time. But those are the kind of things we want to look at. When we're looking at these places, though, you got to remember, you've got to bring your refrigerator, your stove, your toaster, your microwave. All of those appliances, anything that you might need, all of your paper products, your plates, your silverware, your cooking devices, all of your spices. Like, there's things you're going to need to stock. You need lots of groceries the very first time that you move into a new apartment. And for most of the people who are looking at moving down here, the majority of you, you're around about my age. You're no less than 30 and some up into the 60s and 70s. So it's a mature range where most of us don't have great memories of our very first apartment. Few of you, maybe, but for the most of us, we're way past that point. But remember back to when you were young, if you ever went through this, of moving into an apartment and owning nothing. Oh, you need paprika? You have to go to the store and invest in the paprika. Now you need sage? You've got to go to the store and invest in sage. Every little itty bitty tiny thing is something you have to purchase for the first time. Then those things will last you a long time and they just become a consumable item that you go through over long periods of time. We're all good about remembering that toilet paper works this way, or paper towels, or whatever, soap, because we go through them so quickly. But other things that we stock our cupboards with may last years. Hopefully not all your spices, but realistically, I think a lot of us keep them for years with certain ones anyway. And you'll need all of those things. And so those initial purchases, even though Nicaragua is not crazy expensive, they adds up for sure. And you can be talking about a quite large amount of money that you need to spend in order to just move in and live in a new place. And that's before you consider, you know, the appliances, and in many cases, buenas tardes. In many cases, you will want to add air conditioning. Not in all, right? If you're in Jinotega, why would you add air conditioning? Very few people would need to. Even people from the north of the US or the south of Canada, you'd be okay without air conditioning. If you're coming from the Yukon, maybe you'll want air conditioning anyway. But in general, that area, you're fine without it. But in most of the country, you're probably going to want air conditioning. I can live without it in Managua, but I don't want to. I can't live without it in Leon, even though I can go much of the time without it. I can never go completely without it. So it depends on you, and it depends where you're looking at, but assume No place is going to have air conditioning. It's, again, they exist, but they're very rare. And that's something you'll probably want to add. And before anyone tells you, I can't believe that people say this. They'll say, let's just get one of those floor units that you put a tube out the wall. And I'm going to explain something here that's very important, because these look like they're going to be really useful. They're big, they're powerful, it's going to be great. We're just going to put it on the floor. It's got wheels, we can move it around. It's got this huge tubing, it blows all kinds of air. It's going to cool like crazy. No, it's not. That is not how air conditioning works. Let's talk about it. So, an in-window air conditioning unit. This is the old-fashioned stuff that we used to use in the United States, and they use them here sometimes, just not that much. They basically have a unit on the back that blows air top to bottom, technically bottom to top, and cycles that through on the outside. So air is moving past on the outside. It gets super hot on the outside and really cold on the inside. On the inside, the same thing. There's a fan blowing air through. So it's just one piece of metal, one side's hot, one side's cold. It's not really one piece of metal, it's actually a liquid going back and forth, but let's simplify. So the outside is a big chunk of super hot metal, the inside is a big chunk of super cold metal, and we pull the heat from the room by cycling the air through the cold side, and the metal with a little liquid inside moves that heat to the outside, and then we cool that with the not as hot air from outside. That's how air conditioners work. That's how window units work, so they're pretty effective because they're doing this thing with 2 cycles. Now, they've made some new ones I've heard that are even more efficient because they've improved some things, but the basics still work, and it's an effective system. So a split unit is basically the same as a window unit, except things are pulled apart. So you take the back part, the part that the air moves through to keep the outside cool. So it's the part that gets really hot. You take that and put it into a separate unit, and you like mount that to the roof or somewhere outside. And then you take the other piece, the part that blows the cold air around your house, and you put that inside. And you basically just sever the unit that goes into your window in half, and put half on the roof and half somewhere on a wall. And the downside to this is that it's a lot more stuff and more distance between the pieces. But the upsides are that you can put the part that needs to blow the air anywhere that it needs to go and make it as large as you want. And you can make the part that's going to get hot and needs to cool itself outside and put it where it makes sense and make it as large as you want. So you can have really large units that are many times larger and have big fans that can blow air right through, or they can be like on your roof, so the wind coming across the top of your house just pulls that heat away in ways you can't possibly do in a window unit. A window unit is up against the side of the house. There's no way to get really great airflow in most cases, and that airflow needs to be bottom to top realistically. It's not very effective compared to putting something on the roof, especially if it's, say, twice the surface area. And having that big blower inside your house exactly where it needs to be. Often if you put one in a window or whatever, it's kind of blowing just where it can blow. Probably in the middle of the room, it's probably not terrible. But putting one high on the wall that's able to have a big fan blow directly onto your bed or your desk can be a really big deal, because you get the benefits of it being a fan and being an air conditioner all in one. You're just able to make capacity much larger. I don't know how big window units get, but I imagine getting them much beyond 8 to 10,000 BTUs is really hard. Someone's going to write and correct me, and that's great. Get down there, let me know. But when you're talking about split units, even residential ones can easily get to 12,000 BTUs for just regular 110 units you plug into any socket. And if you're getting the ones that are meant for houses built for it, and you're getting the 220 units, getting like 25,000 BTUs is no problem. Those often are more efficient as well, so you get a lot of just benefits from the system. So split units are very popular here because they just work really well. They take the best window units and make them incredibly better, bigger, more efficient, and much more applicable to the room that you're in. And you can have, if you're in a spot where that room has absolutely no access to outside air, or you have a room that doesn't have windows, no problem. You just run pipes to wherever it needs to go. You can do a lot of things. It's just starting to rain on me. We have a huge thunderstorm rolling in from Chinandega. So I also have a dog sitting on my foot because she's really nervous. So that's how those work. So here you will find window units. They're fine. If you want to use those, the nice thing is you can just take it with you. But split units are far more popular because we want a lot of efficiency here, and it's not uncommon to want a little bit more power than a window unit can muster. What you'll never find is central air because it's crazy. It's not very efficient, it doesn't work well, and it doesn't work with the way the houses are designed here, because houses here are designed for you to cool the areas that matter and not everything, because it gets really hot, and that's just not a practical way to do things. So nobody does. It doesn't make sense. And we don't build our houses that way. All that extra ductwork and stuff is really expensive and complex and makes for fragile houses. It's just not the best design, and we leverage a lot of things here for practicality. So you're never going to find that reasonably, but you do have these different types of units. So let's talk about these floor standing units as it rains on me, because they're very different. So remember, when we're talking about window or split units, we're talking about one side has this air circulating by it because it gets hot, and the other side has the air inside circulating by it because it's cold. So it makes the inside cold, the outside gets hotter. That's how it works, right? In case you never thought about it, all the cold that comes into the house, there's hot on the outside to offset that. So floor standing units that you then put a tube out the window don't work in exactly the same way. Of course, the mechanics on the inside work exactly the same. They have to. That's what an air conditioner is. But they don't actually function the way that we described. One part of them does. It sucks in air from the room that you're in, runs it by the cold fins, the cold metal, and blows it back out. So you get that cold air. But then you have hot metal directly attached to it that makes something warm, and you need to cool that off. Well, the problem is, unlike the window unit or the split unit, the part of the metal that gets really hot is inside the room with you. So one part of the air conditioning unit is cold, but another part of it is hot. So now you have hot and cold inside the room. Well, the hot part is warming up the room, not cooling it down. And in total, when you run a device like an air conditioner, overall, it generates energy. Or it uses energy, I'm sorry, it generates heat. So the overall system is warmer than if you weren't running an air conditioner. If the whole world ran air conditioners all the time, the world would become just a little bit warmer. It would not air condition the world. It doesn't magically make the world colder. It actually makes it warmer, just like a fan. A fan functions by generating a tiny bit of heat and moving air as part of the process, and the movement of air hopefully cools you down by air moving past you. But it doesn't actually cool the room. It doesn't actually cool the world. The world becomes just a tiny bit warmer by running the motor. And that's how the air conditioner works, only it runs a bigger motor a lot harder. So it's generating some heat. So not only do you have to dissipate the heat from the cooling effect of the air conditioner, you have to dissipate the heat of the cooling process from the motors and stuff. So there's a lot of heat you need to dissipate, but where's it gonna go? All the hot parts are in the room with you. Now you're gonna say, Scott, I know exactly how this works. You have a pipe that goes out the window and it blows all the hot air out the window. Okay, that's what it looks like, but that logically makes no sense at all. You can't just blow air out a window, because that would create a vacuum. That would be basically running a vacuum, throwing all the air out, and eventually the room would run out of air, and it would be like being in space. We know that isn't what's happening, right? You don't create a vacuum in the room because rooms are not that well sealed. And if they were, the motor would just burn out, right? It's not actually going to do that. It would get really warm because it would start insulating because of the lack of total air. You actually want more air density to help keep things cool. This is actually a side problem with those units. They actually do create a little bit of a vacuum, and it reduces their efficiency. It just kind of sucks, pun intended. But you're talking about blowing hot air out the window, that's great. But remember, air has to come past the hot part of the air conditioner to heat up that air to push it out the window. So we have two problems. One is that all that piping that's running through your house, plastic tubing, right, gets really hot, and it heats up that part of the room. So things that we often do is wrap it in towels and all kinds of things to try to keep it like towels and blankets and stuff. It's always what we do, and it helps insulate that, and it helps it to not leak air, because you'll notice almost every one of those units, those tubes fall off or they leak air all over the place. So we're constantly like covering the back of one of those units in duct tape, wrapping everything in like fleece blankets, multiple layers, making sure that where it goes through the window is sealed. Like, it's a lot of work. We're still missing a big piece. Where's the air coming from that it's blowing across the heat to blow out the window? Well, from the air conditioner's perspective, it's just sucking air out of the room. But the room, like we said, would create a vacuum if it was just doing that. So the room, while it does lose air pressure, it's pretty minor, that air is being replaced from somewhere. And what it's doing is wherever your room gets air, under the door, from other windows, leaks somewhere, air is coming in. Warm air from some other part of your house or maybe the outside. So instead of in a closed system like you have in a car when you put it on max, or in any of the air conditioner examples we gave before, where it's just taking static air that's sitting in a room and cooling it down by moving it over cold bits, here we have some air that's in the room being moved over cold bits, but a constant supply of hot air is being moved into the room and then sucked through the machine to blow outside. So your room in one way is trying to cool down the air that's in it, but it's also taking some of that cooled air out because it can't suck directly from another part of the house. It has to suck from the room you're in. So part of the air that it's just cooled down, it's blowing right over itself and out the window. This makes for a lot less efficiency than a normal unit where we're putting all the hot parts outside and all the cold bits inside and not introducing any unnecessarily new warm air from whatever's bordering the room and not creating a vacuum. If anything, you want higher air pressure to increase cooling capacity. It's not really something you worry about, but the last thing you want to do is create a vacuum. That just makes it less efficient. So those units, they can work in a pinch, but they're going to use easily double or triple the power of a efficient, well-designed air conditioning unit. That's what you want to have. So when you're looking at putting things in here, all of that is to say the cost of moving into an apartment, you probably are going to want air conditioning at least to some degree, and you absolutely don't want to have those if you can help it. They make a lot of sense because they're easy to take and move with you, throw it in the back of a car, drive to a new apartment, plug them in, put in a little bit of, have some duct tape, some towels, blankets, and suddenly you have a working system, but you're going to pay so much more in power that people don't want to do it. Unless you're moving like every month and then, well, maybe. But even then, the window units might be nice. But window units are tough because we don't tend to have those kinds of windows here. So putting them in, often people cut holes in the walls to install them rather than actually putting them in the windows, because we don't have that kind of stuff. Like we have like glass slat windows in a lot of places, or just open metal bar windows, things that don't lend themselves to air conditioning units. So those can be a challenge. That's why split units are the name of the game here. But those need to be installed. So here's a problem that we run into. When you move to a new place, you may take those with you. And when you get there, okay, maybe you own a $500 air conditioning unit. Great, that will cool down your tiny apartment. You should be good to go. But then you got to install it. And that typically carries a cost of somewhere in the vicinity of $300. And of course, you had to uninstall it when you left somewhere. That carries a cost of like $180. So altogether, you may be looking at $400 or $500 to remove an air conditioner and install the air conditioner. That was $500 anyway. So one move with that air conditioner to apartments could mean $1,000 total, even though the unit is only $500. That creates some problems. If you're going to be staying in a place for a number of years, or you think it's permanent, then the investment in installing it is a great deal, and it's going to pay for itself fast, and you're going to enjoy using it far more. Like, you will just turn it on and have it work all the time. Whereas the floor units, big problems, always wondering if it'll get the room cool. You'll often run it non-stop, listen to that loud sound, and it just never gets below 85 degrees. Whereas you use one of the split units for a far less amount of power being used, gets down to 68 degrees without a problem, and fast. So those are very big differences you need to be aware of. Also, this is a big deal. Split units and window units, they collect water, right? Every unit, every air conditioner collects water, but they do it in such a way that the one just drips out the back on the outside of the house. The other, they normally put pipes through the house. Sometimes you have to clean them, and by pipes, I mean just plastic tubing, and the water that condenses inside the air conditioner just runs outside. For us, it goes into a side garden here, and we have a whole row of beautiful bushes and flowers that are watered by the air conditioning units, right? Even during the dry season, they're always doing well because there's a little bit of dripping air conditioning all the time. And honestly, during the hotter dry season, they actually run a little bit more. And so they get a little bit more water condensed from the air, and it does great for them. So it can be a great system. You can also collect that water for something else, should you want. But if you're like here and it's raining all the time, probably not worth the effort. The problem with the floor standing units is that water has to be collected inside the room. You can't push it through any other spot because everything goes up. And so you end up with a water reservoir in them, and you have to deal with that all the time. Or with many of them, you have to put like a bucket behind it or something. You can, in theory, run one in a bathroom and have it go directly into a shower or something. There's ways to make it kind of work, but you're making things harder and harder, and very few people have spaces that make sense for that. So it's something to be aware of, that you're looking at potentially just a lot of overhead and problems. We had, in our house in La Barria, we had split units in the main part of the house, and in the secondary part of the house, we had floor standing units. They were a nightmare. They were constantly flooding. We would end up with water all over the place. We'd have to, take huge things of water to empty it on a regular basis into showers. Often that caused a mess because it would overflow the shower. They didn't work very well. We would run them around the clock, and they would keep the rooms only barely bearable while making the hallways easily 110 degrees. And so it was really awful. And every time you opened a door, it would instantly take the rooms right up to the same temperature as the outside air, or warmer, because there was so much hot air ready to just get pulled in. So we didn't have a good situation at all for it, but no situation is truly good for it. I'm hoping that the audio remains good on this. I've moved to the GoPro 11 without any microphones because I'm in the rain, but it's a beautiful day and I'm enjoying the rain, and I'm hoping that this just sounds okay and I'm able to get the video out for you guys. So when we're looking at all of the cost of the air conditioner, then we need to think about all the other costs you're going to have, and I have no idea what that's going to be. Again, we want to do some videos and really break that down and maybe come up with some great prices for you, but let's talk about what we're realistically looking at, right? You need a number of appliances. There's no way that's going to be under $1,000, not realistically. You can go really, really cheap and get away with, like, you know, little tiny refrigerator. You can have just some burners to cook on, maybe just a microwave. It depends what you want to do. If you don't cook at home, you can get away with very little. But if you do cook at home, then of course you're going to need enough stuff to cook on, and you can estimate about what that's going to be. In case you're wondering how much things cost, they're a little bit more expensive here than they are in the US, for example, and probably a little bit less than Canada, probably very similar to Europe. Everything is imported here, so we're not going to get some amazing deals. It's not like moving to China or a Thailand, where a lot of this stuff is manufactured locally and you can get really good deals because either the companies have a presence there or they're actually making the products there, or maybe doing final assembly there. Those regions of the world get a lot of appliances at some of the lowest prices you could possibly imagine. The United States gets pretty decent prices because of the massive logistics infrastructure, and a few things are actually made there. So those prices, those places get really good prices in some cases. Here we don't have high prices, we don't have a lot of big overhead going on, but we do have to bring those things in from other countries. What we tend to do is have very little selection, and then what we get in very large bulk, and those things have reasonable prices, but they still have to be shipped in from the US, from China, from Vietnam, wherever, and then sold here in smaller numbers. We do get a lot from South Korea as well. So you're looking at needing to buy all those appliances, and we'll, again, try to break that down so you can really make some good estimates looking at what real prices are. But you can also look from abroad. If you're interested, major stores are La Curaçao, Gallo Mas Gallo, Tropigas. All of those places have big stores. Simon is another one. They're a little bit more expensive. Sensa, which is an Ace hardware chain here in the country. All of those things will have prices online, and those, while maybe not the cheapest, are very indicative of the real prices here. There's not a big used market. If you think you're going to get everything used, you're going to go on Facebook Marketplace. I'm not saying you shouldn't try, but assume it's not going to work. There's very little available that way. What is on there is often fake, as is the case with those things. So there aren't great services for finding deals. If you live here and have lots of time, of course, you can find deals over time. But if you are here and need to get everything and it's quick, assume you're not going to have much luck, and it will waste so much time that you may wish you had not done that. Then there's all the normal things you need for a house. You know, just plastic bins or chairs or whatever. You can shop around and get fairly good prices, but you're never going to get super cheap prices because, again, we don't make those things here. So there's no way for us to get outrageously cheap prices on imported goods. The time that you experience this the most is when you move in for the first time. As you do that, you're going to be seeing all the products that you need to restock your life, and you're going to need to restock things that aren't made here almost exclusively. Sometimes you can get lucky with furniture. Furniture is made here if you're okay with Nicaraguan style furniture, and probably you should be in most cases because you'll get your best bang for the buck and it just stylistically goes with the environment better, whatever. But that is something to consider. If you're not careful, you could easily end up spending an outrageous amount of money because you're buying a lot of things that are imported and you're just not being super frugal. That's a one-time thing. Once your house is stocked, you're pretty much good. Consumable items are often made here, especially your food. So as long as you're not doing something crazy like buying packaged food from the United States, then you're normally okay. That's something you really have to look out for. If you're addicted to American or similar foreign food products that have no local equivalents and you're not willing to adapt to local equivalents, you're going to be very, very sorry, unless you have a really high budget and then you don't care. We're fine, right? We'll go out and buy Reese's candy bars every so often for the kids because they really like them. It's not a big deal. Are they expensive as candy bars go? Absolutely. They're ridiculously expensive. Could we get local equivalents? Well, the local ones aren't exactly the same. So we're talking about a thing that has to be truly imported. It's coming from the United States. It's coming from the port of Philadelphia. It has to come on a container ship to the port of Cabeza. It has to be shipped across the country. It has to pay really high tariffs coming from the United States. These things start adding up, and then it has to be in specialty grocery stores, and they have to keep it air conditioned or it will melt. Like, you just keep coming up with, wow, this is an expensive product to bring in, it doesn't take very much common sense to, if you're thinking about the process, go, whoa, that's going to be expensive. How would you keep the price down? The only reasonable way that they keep the price down anywhere in the world is they make it locally and don't have to pay the expensive logistics or tariff fees. If you're going to be in, for example, in Thailand, they make the Reese's peanut butter products locally in Malaysia, and they don't have a big tariff or any tariff coming across the border, and they ship them by truck. So instead of, you know, tripling the cost per item, they're actually cheaper potentially than the ones made in the United States because they don't have to go through American labor. So even if you're paying extra for a premium brand, you're getting it made less expensively because of the region of the world it's being made in, so it offsets that cost dramatically. So you have to be really aware of where this stuff's coming from and what's available in the market. You just have to put in some effort and pay a little bit of attention. If you want Doritos that are actually coming from the United States, you're gonna pay quite a bit more for that bag of chips. But we have Ranchitos made in Honduras. Honestly, they're better, and you're supporting a semi-local brand, and they don't have to pay the high tariffs, and they don't have to go on a container ship. They're simply being thrown on a truck, and that truck can go really slowly because chips in a bag last at least a few extra days. It's not a big deal, and they're coming right down from San Pedro Sula. So those things we're able to get at really good prices. So if you're happy with Ranchitos, which is actually a reason to get chips here because Ranchitos are delicious, then you're in great shape. But if you want something from the United States and there's no local equivalent, it's going to be ridiculous. A good example is pasta. We have pasta that is made here, and it is cheap. But if you want to get the pasta like Barilla that is made in the United States, that's actually coming from right next to my dad's apartment in upstate New York. So you're talking about New York labor rates, New York logistics rates on trucks, a big container ship, and shipping it down here. Sure, if you want ultra premium pasta for some reason, it is widely available and you can get it, but you are going to pay a premium through the roof for that. So just be aware that you need to shop intelligently when you're looking for food, and you have to have flexibility. You can't be addicted to brand names. That is a universal thing. Brand names screw you anywhere in the world, but here they're going to screw you a whole lot more because the penalty for them is much higher. And like in the United States, if you want to get a specific brand of anything, clothing, food, cars, whatever, chances are you're paying nearly only for the brand, right? If you want to get BMW versus Chevy, you're not paying a huge tariff to get BMW. You're only paying the difference in the brand name and whatever features are different. Pretty much. But here you're paying not only that additional for the brand, and then you're paying for all the logistics and tariffs on top of that, and that produces the bulk of the cost, not a small ancillary part of it. So that mindset, really important. For most people it's not a problem, but if it's something that matters to you, it can be really impactful. And here in Nicaragua, because we're a small market and have very few big trade agreements, the amount that it impacts you is more than in most markets. So just be prepared. Even if you've been to other places, it is not uncommon for people to misunderstand the degree to which it'll be a big deal. If you go to Spain, for example, the EU imports nearly everything. So very few things have an additional specialty import cost. Most things are made there or made nearby through a nation that has some great trade agreement with the bloc. We don't have that. If you're going to be in the Middle East, the same kind of things. Many things are made there. Those are big markets that share border zones. But here we don't have that. We're a tiny region. The only thing we share a border zone with is Central America, and we don't have ports nearby. So anything that goes into, say, Guatemala or El Salvador has to be shipped a really long way across many borders, and it takes weeks to get here. That adds cost. There's no way around it. Even if your labor is inexpensive, all those idling trucks, all those days on the road, all that refrigeration, all those drivers, it adds up, and eventually your products are more expensive. We do make some things here, and they're very cheap. And we do have lots of things made in Costa Rica and Honduras of very high quality that we like a lot. And they're quite cheap. And we bring in our ice cream from Costa Rica, right? We have some that's made here. It's edible, but the stuff we get from Costa Rica is fantastic. We pay a premium for that, but not a crazy premium because it's not coming over a high-cost border, nor is it coming on a container ship. So one of the reasons I spend so much time looking at the location of origin of all the food that we get here is it really helps me understand why it costs what it does, which things are going to cost, when it's going to change, and realizing when food is branded from somewhere but then made locally, which happens a lot, but less here than most places. But if you don't understand the import process or you're not thinking about it, it's really easy to get confused as to why some things are really expensive and other ones are cheap, when if you're putting a little bit of thought into it, in many cases, you can predict it pretty easily and simply shop in a way that gives you local goods. If you want to buy local potato chips or tajadas that are made from plantains, things like that, they are so cheap and often really delicious. High quality, very fresh, made around the corner. But you want potato chips from the US, you're going to have a lot of preservatives and a lot of shipping costs, and they're going to be sitting on a truck for a long time. All those little things add up, both to cost and a lack of quality. So all things to consider when you're looking at moving down in the cost, and the biggest challenge that we have of there not being enough short-term rentals that are furnished. So consider those things. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe, share on social media, tell your friends about the show, let your family know that there's this show out there educating people about travel, relocation, Nicaragua, and more here in beautiful Latin America, out in the rain, which is how I love to do it. And I will see all of you tomorrow.